afternoon, everybody. Hi, it is Eric Smith, and I am broadcasting here on a Wednesday. Today's not Tuesday. Today's not Sunday. Today is a hot and muggy day here in the city of Cedar Rapids. These are what we would call the dog days of summer. But you know what a good thing about days like this are? The corn grows like crazy in the heat. So the farmers are just sitting back going, that's right, that's right, that's money. So it's okay. We have to have our hot days and we have to have our cold days too. But today is a special day because we're doing a live stream with our brother Kelly Powers. Now, Kelly Powers is a minister from Canada. Now, I don't know what it is with you guys up there in Canada. We get a lot of people from Canada on our show, which is okay as long as they don't bring that accent like Chris Claus does. If you hear Chris Claus talk,
Well, I'm 100% American, so don't worry about that.
oh, that's right, because you're a migrant or an immigrant, one of the two.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Oh,
we're gonna have a great conversation tonight. It's not gonna last too long. Probably about an hour is what my goal is for here. Anything beyond that, I got a church meeting tonight at 6:30, so I'm gonna have to jet on out of here, regardless of whether we finish this thing up by then or not. But the reason why I brought Kelly on here tonight, and I connected with Kelly, was a couple of weeks ago. There was a live stream that he had done with Kenny Bomer, the Imam Kenny Bomer, and there's some things said on his show that I didn't know if Kelly knew who I was, what the relationship I had with the Imam. So I reached out to him, and we've had a couple of pretty good conversations on the phone, gone back and forth, of course, on Instant Messenger, and I've got to know quite a few things about him. And I've also stalked your website too, by the way. I did. He has a website. So what I want Kelly to do, if you could for us, sir, if you could just give us, a brief synopsis of what you do, who you are, and how you got into doing what you're doing today.
well, my dad used to say that he stuck up for me that people said I ate poop and howled at the moon. He said he never seen me eat poop. So I do howl at the moon at times at night. So if it gets too late at night, things happen. I'm a pretty crazy kind of guy. I'm from Southern California originally. Grew up there for years, lived in Las Vegas, lived in Florida for a few years. Met my wonderful wife almost 21 years ago next month. She's from Canada, moved to Canada in 2001 and been in Canada for almost 20 years, live on Vancouver Island. It is a great place, I think you were briefly talking about not too long ago. It is paradise out here. So if you're ever going to move to Canada, Vancouver Island is definitely the place to go. I've been a born again Christian for almost 44 years. I hit 50 not long ago and became a Christian at the age of 6. My parents divorced, unfortunately, when I was young, just almost around the age of 10. And so I lived with my dad for many, many years. And during my teenage years, I was kind of a little bit of a wild, crazy kind of guy. It wasn't until after high school, one of my friends who was an atheist apparently became a Christian. Got me going back to church. I was doing some stuff in Las Vegas, getting connected with some churches. A little bit later, he became a Mormon. I didn't know nothing about the LDS faith, or much less really any other religions for that matter. And it kind of really woke me up to what does it mean to be a Christian and why. So that's the early 1990s. And from that, it really caused me to examine what it means to be a Christian, the origins, the Bible, archaeology, history. This was before we had a thing called the internet. This is what we did old school. We went to libraries. And for you young people out there, you won't understand what that is. But so I got into counterculture apologetics in the early 1990s, been in almost for 30 years now. So I'm pretty familiar with, lots of groups, Seventh-day Adventists, Oneness Pentecostalism, Word Faith, Jehovah's Witnesses, LDS. I was very familiar with the Nation of Islam back in the day when I was in Vegas. I did lots of talking to those kind of people. But recently, I've talked to Muslims off and on over the years, but I don't really have much on my website or on my YouTube channel. But As of late, things have changed dramatically, so I've been putting a lot more time and energy into my studies, and I do plan to do videos down the road discussing the differences of Islam and Christianity, the issues of Jesus and Muhammad, and comparing things of the Bible with the Quran. So that'll be coming down the road, but I'm taking my time on that.
All right. What do you do with ministry today? How are you involved in ministry today?
When I'm not down at the moon, I'm involved locally with a fellowship out here. Do a few different home groups where I'm mentoring young adults, which is great. Helping guys and girls, ages anywhere from 18 to, they call themselves young adults, could be up to their 40s. So we're not, we don't show any favoritism there. Occasionally I do get to preach from time to time, share the word of God. I do things locally, helping people locally, reaching out to evangelism, things like that. I'm just kind of a hands-on kind of guy. I'm really into evangelism, discipleship, mentoring. So I'm not paid staff. I'm more of a volunteer. I've always been a layman, but I've had, in the past, I've been an elder, lay pastor, evangelism kind of coordinator, young groups coordinator. So I've had my hands in a lot of places, but don't ask me to sing because I'll get fired. So.
What's funny about you saying that is that I purposely sit in the front of the church, and the reason why I do that is because I don't want people in front of me listen to me sing. Yeah, it's got to be painful because I'm one of the most off-key guy. You want to sing praises to God, but
I,
you don't
I
want to
stand by
listen to
my
the next
wife
guy do it.
because she actually has, and I'm not just saying it because she's my wife, she has an amazing voice. So a lot of times we're somewhere, she'll just kind of just be singing. I'll just kind of move my lips because I don't want to mess it up. Right. So she takes care of all the good stuff there.
Yeah, it's always nice to have somebody in your family that can sing. My daughter, another funny story. My daughter is not a singer, never has been. And when she was a kid, probably sixth, seventh, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, they would always say, "Okay, well, turn to page blah, blah, in the hymnal to sing." We'd always tell her the wrong page because we didn't want her catching up and singing. We wanted her to try to. We didn't want her singing at church because she was that bad. Anyway, okay, how do we get off on that? All right, let's talk about your YouTube channel
Hmm.
and your website. That takes a lot of time to do, and I know that just because we have a website that I don't know anything about. I, we have somebody else do that for us, and I do this YouTube thing on Sundays and Tuesdays, and it just takes a whole lot of time for you got to prep for it,
Oh, yeah.
you got to do the show, you got to contact people, and put out. You're always answering and fielding questions, and it's a job. It's something that you love to do because you're doing it for the Lord. You're doing, you got to have your heart in the right place when you do it. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about those two things: your YouTube
Hmm.
channel and your website.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So when I was involved with countercult apologetics in the 90s, while I was getting involved with it, some of the guys, that I really liked back in those days, and but I never got to meet was like the late Dr. Walter Martin, or Chuck Smith who's kind of the major guy founder for Calvary Chapel, which I was a part of in ministry off and on when I lived in the States, and so I got mentored and discipled under pastors and was just involved, and so doing lots of street witnessing back in those days when I was doing it, handing out tracts, talking to people, just trying, I had involved with outreach ministry to homeless people, things like that. Well, people would always ask me questions, like, how do I talk to this person? How do I, if an atheist says this, what do I say? If a Jehovah's Witness knocks on my door, what do I say? And so my wife had this great idea. Why don't you, start writing articles? And that's how it all started. This was back in like just after we got married in 2000. I think not too long after that, she just said, why do you keep always, telling people and you write little notes and hand it out? Why don't you just write articles? So I started writing articles and put it on a website back in the day and went through many names in the early stages. It was like Truth Ministries, Speaking for Truth, Reach the World for Jesus, Apologetics for Christians, and Berean Perspective has been now I think that's the name that's just kind of stuck over these years. So I just started writing articles, putting information together. One of the things when I have articles is I always put, like you can see some stuff behind me. I make sure I quote things accurately. I make sure that I don't, say, well, this is what such and such said. I always make sure that if I quote something, that it's actually the real deal. And so, yeah, so I have an online ministry where I have articles, and I also now have YouTube. Years ago, I was in Pal Talk, and I think I've overheard some of your programs that you guys have some Pal Talk history as well. I was in Pal Talk in 2002 to roughly 2006, so roughly 4 years. And these back in the days when I had many debates with some friends who were Calvinists, like Matt Slick and some other guys back in those days, Gene Cook, and good old days. And we would be witnessing and talking to Jewish people and Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, and all that. And so one of my good friends used to always tell me, Kelly, you got to get on YouTube. And I was like, I don't want to be on YouTube. I don't want to look at myself. Who would want to look at me? And so I just always just didn't want to do YouTube. I just never did really want to get into it. Well, about 3 years ago, I don't know why I changed, but I changed, and I started doing some stuff on YouTube and was just doing videos, things on word faith teachings, exposing, things like on Kenneth Copeland or Joyce Meyer, T.D. Jakes, those kind of people, some of the bigger names. And because I came out of a little bit of word faith, just a little bit, but not too bad, but I was involved for a short time. And then I just started, doing stuff. And then when COVID hit, something changed. I actually said, you know what, I'm going to start looking to, StreamYard, Zoom. I was like, I want to start checking this, doing some live stuff, right? Talking to people live. And, I think I froze. If we can still hear me or not. There we go.
We can hear you. Yeah.
So 2018 is kind of, I think when somewhere maybe August or something like that, I first came onto YouTube and was just slowly doing some videos. Wasn't really doing a whole lot. But about a year or so, just over a year ago, I started doing the live stuff. And it's really like exploded. It's really changed where now I was doing 3 live streams a week. Now it's just 2 because I'm more involved with fellowship. But I have a Tuesday, which is just basically question and answers where I witness to all kinds of people. Fridays are like a special Friday night apologetics where I'll have pastors, apologists on. I've had like Rob Bowman on there. I've had Anthony Rogers on there, Michael Burgos on there, some other names that are out there on apologetics. I have debates on Friday nights. It's great. And then I have people who have ex-testimonies like ex-Oneness Pentecostals, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Mormons who've come onto my channel and share their testimonies. And so it's been great. So it's a ministry still growing, but the YouTube world is so much more fast-paced than writing an article.
Sure. Yeah. And you don't have to really cite as many sources too when you're writing an article.
Yeah.
Now you said that you were on Pal Talk for 4 years.
Yeah.
Have you recognized any of these guys that are on the show from Pal Talk? Because they've tried to get me to go on. It's not Pal Talk anymore. It's Discord. I think they spend a lot of times on Discord, and the whole platform just seems to me so cumbersome. But there's a lot of great conversations that go on there. How much do you think that you learned about defending your faith while you were on Pal Talk?
Pal Talk was
that's
great.
Probably a good place to do it.
Pal Talk is great. I actually have 1, 2, 3, still 5 friends back from Pal Talk days that I'm still friends with through Facebook. A couple of the guys are actually on YouTube, different stuff that they do. But Pal Talk was great in those days because it was interesting because if you guys know, like, when you go into a Pal Talk and you have a room, whoever's the moderator, admin, sorry, you set the topic, you can control it. It actually shows you on the side where who's all in your room. So you actually know who's all there. That's what I don't like about YouTube. You don't know who all's watching, which is kind of weird to me. I wish that we knew that. But Pal Talk, you knew all the people that were there, and they put, click that little raised hand. So they put their hand up to talk. If it was someone that was a person that was just going to be mocking or whatever, well, then you knew not to let that guy up or whatever. But you talk to everybody. And so it was kind of neat because back in those days, I had a weekly thing on Fridays, and it was called Friday Night Apologetics. And so every week when I was doing this, I'd be defending the faith against Muslims, against Jewish people, against Mormons or Jehovah Witnesses that would come in. They would come into the room, and we'd be always talking almost on the same thing: who is Jesus, right? Who is Jesus? What's the gospel, right? And it was neat because there was so many great conversations. So some were very, very respectful. Some guys were not. But it really kind of, in a way, like, when you're talking to that many people of different faiths, it really gets you into the game, right? Like,
Right.
in everyday life, when you're out in your work, your job, or wherever you go, you don't really talk that much about your faith in general. And especially in Pound Talk, when there's so much variety all at one time, it really, it's kind of like, you're entering in this ring, and you got to be prepared and ready. And you might get knocked down a couple times, but you get back up, right? And I really think it was great back in those days. It really helped me in my Christian ministry.
Yeah, well, it's a great training site when you get in, like you said, to get in there and mix it up with people like that from different backgrounds, different faiths. Let me ask you this: out of all the different backgrounds of people that you've dealt with, Mormons, Unitarians, Muslims, take your flavor, take your pick. Which one would you think was the most difficult to deal with spiritually, for one? That would be one category, and I guess I don't want to pile it on here, but second category would be socially.
Hmm.
So which one do you think is most difficult to deal with spiritually, and then which one is the most difficult to actually get along with?
The most difficult one probably to deal with spiritually is, God, that's a good question. Like, when you're talking to Jehovah Witnesses, there's definitely clear differences. When you're talking to Mormons, there's definitely clear differences, even though some of the language is very familiar. When you're talking to Muslims, there's very differences. If you're talking to, obviously, atheists, obviously, no brainer. I think one of the hardest ones that I've had to deal with, I think, really is probably two groups. The oneness camp. If you guys don't know much about oneness, I can expound on that in a second. And this may offend some people, and I don't mean it to offend, but Roman Catholics. And the reason why I say that, I do believe Roman Catholics can be Christians, but I'm talking about the official church, the magisterium, popes, when you get into all the catechism and all that, because there's many similarities, but also many differences. And so when you're talking to people who are religious and go under the umbrella of the term Christian, but they have some different views, it's harder sometimes to share things because they're so convinced. When you're witnessing to, say, a Muslim, well, it's pretty much a no-brainer. They reject Jesus as the Son of God. They reject the Bible. They reject the crucifixion. They reject the resurrection. So you're just defending the faith as a whole. But when you're talking to people who really think they're Christians, those guys, I think, are really the harder people. And Mormons too, because Mormons are such nice people in general. They're well, why aren't they Christians? Because they're called the Church of Jesus Christ Latter Saints. I've been told that numerous times. We're Christians. Look at the name of our church. And so, when people have the same terminology as us, that's when it's harder. And that's when Paul said in the Bible, like many times, be careful of those who preach another Jesus and another gospel, because they have the appearance that they sound to be Christian, but in fact, they're not. So, what was your second question?
The one who is the most difficult to get along socially,
Hmm.
and because
I don't really know.
well, I used to engage quite a bit in the evolution creationism debate, and with there you get a lot of atheists. Of course, they're going to be purely naturalistic causations and things of this nature, and you get. I mean, it would get pretty nasty. They would get pretty nasty because there's just no restraining device there to keep them from treating other humans the way that they would do. But then at the same time, now that I deal specifically with Islam and focus mainly on that, um, I would say that Muslims, even though there's a level of nastiness there, as far as well, of course, what's going on right now, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
I never had that when I was dealing with atheists, but it's not like you would get with atheists. So That's basically what I'm meaning by
You know,
that.
when I lived in Las Vegas, I lived out there for roughly 16 years, um, uh, pretty much as a whole, yeah. And in Las Vegas, if any of you guys been in Las Vegas before, even though it is full of sin, there's definitely a lot of good Christian churches out there, a lot of outreach, a lot of evangelism. A lot of Christians are literally like just living for Jesus out there. Reason why I bring it up, when I lived there, I really look back, and it was also a good for me in the 90s of growing in my Christian faith, because there's so many religions out there as well. There's a lot of religions out there, a lot of spiritualism. But going on what you said though, I met a lot of Muslims out there, Nation of Islam, and then different kinds. I don't remember all the different groups that we talked about. Just Muslim or Muslims. If I say it, pronouncing it wrong. No apologies to any Muslims out there. But when I was witnessing to many of them out there, talking, interacting, for the most part, they were always very respectful in general, right? So I normally had good experiences. There was a few times. There was a few times where some got pretty radical, and it got a little crazy. And I won't go into all that right now, but it got a little feisty where I might have not been here. But in most cases, it was great. But when on the internet now, on the YouTube, and even in Pal Talk, some of the Pal Talk times, when you're behind a computer or looking at a screen, and you've got this mic right here, people are very different.
Right. Yeah.
This is what I've noticed. In
Right.
real life, people are different, and online, they're very different. And it's really crazy how that works. And so what I've noticed with online Muslims is they can be kind of crude, rude, attacking. But in real life, at least my experiences back in the day, a lot of them were not like that. But that was also before a lot of what we have now with the internet.
Yeah. And what what I am seeing is this push to deplatform people, this push to silence people
Mm,
into submission, into not talking about their faith. And when we talk about, you mentioned several different differences between the everyday Christian faith, as far as who Jesus Christ is, the deity of Christ, the crucifixion of Christ, the resurrection of Christ, and the saving atonement that He provides us. When you try to engage a Muslim on that fact, and you see it, I mean, you're on Facebook and you see some of these groups on how it's always, well, you Christians don't know your faith, you Christians don't know your Bible, you
right.
Christians don't know. It's like, well, hold on a second. Why does everybody have to be ignorant of their faith in order for you to be correct?
Yeah.
And it's incredible
Yeah.
the amount of hypocrisy that goes along with that, because I could just as equitably say you're not aware of all the anachronisms that you find in your Quran. You're not aware of all the historical errors, all of the insertions from the Jewish Talmud, Syriac folklore, apocryphal writings, and Gnosticism. You're not. But it just doesn't seem like there's a perspective that Muslims have about Christianity that is consistent with the Christian faith.
You know what
And
I've in real life people, not online people, because even this last year, I've talked to a few Muslims out here, and when I would talk to them, different places I was either working or other places just talking, I got to know some, and I'd ask him, and actually one specific one, he was from, oh gosh, I may be wrong. It was either Iran or Pakistan. It was one of the two. I can't remember for sure. Really nice guy. We had some chats, and he asked me about what I believe, and I told him I was a Christian, and he said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "Who he was?" He told me who he was. I said, "Do you know much about the Christian faith?" He goes, "Not really." And I was surprised, and I was like, "Okay." And I said, "Well, what do you know?" And he just barely just shared just little bits and pieces. He never read the Bible at all, but he's been a Muslim all his life, and I found that kind of peculiar. And he was also in North America for quite a bit of time as well. So what that told me, and that wasn't the only occasion that's ever happened to me, is that a lot of times when we as Christians, whether you're talking to Muslims or other groups, I've talked to atheists a lot, who, younger people, especially younger people, they've never even heard the name Jesus. Who's this Jesus guy, right? So the reason why I bring it up is a lot of times we can't always assume what certain people do and do not believe. A lot of times what I like to do is I just like to ask questions. What do you believe? Share about, share your faith, right? And go from there in how we're going to witness to them. Because there's a lot of inaccurate information. And off what you were saying, there's a lot of Muslims who've been told false information about the Bible, but they've never read the Bible. Yeah.
And that's what I get a lot is they've been told a lot of things about, for an example, the Gospels. They said, well, we don't know who wrote the Gospels. Why do you Christians trust those Gospels? There's so many. The Bible has been corrupted. We know it's been corrupted, and you just really this is your argument when all
the
you have to
Quran
do is
never
just
says that.
right. Exactly, Connie. That's
Mhm.
exactly right. The Quran never says that the Bible's
Yeah,
corrupted.
their
Corrupted.
own
As a matter of
their
fact, it
own
says go to the
religion
people. If you have a
never
question, go to
says
the people of
that.
the book.
That's
Right.
right. The Quran is basically bowing to us for them to basically bow to us and ask us about certain things. you know,
Yeah.
but you don't get that. You don't get that from today's Muslims at all. I mean, they just mainly want to put us down and claim and just tear the Bible away when the Quran and when their Islam does not do that.
Well,
Does
it's
not do
interesting
that.
if a Muslim will exactly, again, I'm still doing certain things, but things that I've been learning lately is when you read particular surahs in the Quran, there are many of them that actually are, in many ways, endorsing the people of the book, the scriptures, the Torah, the Injil, the Psalms, and what they claim from the 6th century till now, it's all been corrupted, but they have no actual evidence that backs up what they claim. And so you say, well, if what we had from that time of the 6th century, what would you go on? What would you say is true? And really, in the end, if you ask a direct Muslim directly, if you're reading the Bible, when you're going through, say, the Gospel of John or Matthew, Mark, Luke, whatever, you say, okay, you believe it's corrupted. Okay, fair enough. Tell me which ones are okay. Let's just go through it. Give me the list of all the verses and chapters in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that you believe are officially okay, that haven't been corrupted, haven't been tainted, altered, or changed. You give me that list. They can't do it.
They won't do
Essentially,
it.
what they will claim is
Right,
anything
they
that
won't.
disagrees with the Quran, that is what's corrupted.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
And
know?
yeah,
And
you're exactly
you
right.
can't
That's what
do
they're
that
saying.
in history. That's ass backwards. You can't do that. I mean, hey, I can write a religion and then now say, well, if the Quran isn't aligning with my religion, then the Quran is corrupted.
Yeah.
Doesn't go like that. It's the first that begins it, the Bible, and anything that does not line up with that is falsehood. I mean,
Yeah.
God said that. It's not the God. It's not of God's statutes. Then it's falsehood.
Yeah. And it's important too, like for Christians, I mean, when you're reading the Bible, there are things in there that can be hard to understand, things that may have appearance of contradictions. Maybe one thing's worded one way here, one there, and we need to understand the context, the culture, the time frame, how things work. But you don't throw the baby, out with the bathwater, how that expression goes, right?
You
You
said it
got to
right.
examine it in its proper context. But what happens is these apparent, things, they just latch on. Oh, see, right there, the Bible's wrong. And again, what you said to me, we have history with the Bible that goes back to the first century with church fathers who were
Hmm.
disciples of the disciples that talk about these people, that they're real people, they really existed. These things were really written, and we have manuscripts dating back to the first few centuries. You can't look up online, well, who can really verify what was written in the Quran and when? You really can't verify those things. So when you compare the two, I mean, the evidence by far is overwhelmingly in the Bible side.
And for them to make that argument and to tell them that they're making an argument that's hypocritical because they'll never apply the same type of standard to the Quran as they will to the Bible, because they'll say
Right.
that the Quran doesn't need to be defended. We know, notice that, not believe, that we know that the Quran is from God. And then you ask them for the sources, where it'll tell us about the life of Muhammad, the history of all of Islam. That's all 9th and 10th century. That's not 7th and 8th century, where
Right.
we have these events as they're occurring in real time. We don't have any writings from that.
Right.
So, and it's all an oral tradition. Well, if an oral tradition is superior to a written tradition, why do you have all kinds of things in writing to begin with?
What's
It's
also
just
interesting too is if you read through the church fathers, I haven't read them all, but quite a bit. When you're reading through the church fathers, the first couple of centuries, there's 37 different direct quotes or half quotes from the Bible. 37,000.
37. Okay, I thought you said
So if
37.
you
Like,
put
there's got to
that
be a couple
data
more than that.
together, it substantiates that the Bible that we have is actually authentically trustworthy, right?
You
Because
want to
people
hear?
say, "Oh, it came 4th century later when such and such made it." Like, no, that's not true. We
No,
already knew
right.
what was actually considered inspired and true way before that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
when you bring up the early church fathers, one of the statistics that I have read is that we can compile the entire New Testament from the writings of the early church fathers,
Correct.
with the exception of 10 inconsequential. Well, I don't
Yes,
say
yes,
everything in the Bible's there, but
that's accurate. Correct. Yeah.
10 inconsequential verses. So it's absolutely amazing.
And that speaks
When you start
volumes
making these
because, I
comparisons.
mean, again,
Exactly.
like we may not have the originals today. This is true. I mean, that's okay. But we have at least evidence. This is also good for when you're talking to atheists or other people, because when people say the Bible's been made up or it's been forged or copied or this, that, but we actually have stuff that goes back to the first early times that can actually back up the things that we have in our Bible today that give validity to what we believe. And if someone says, "Oh, well, it's been altered," say 6 centuries later, like we were just talking about, well, okay, where's your evidence that that manuscript has been altered? What do you have? Same thing with Book of Mormon. Mormons claim, that their Book of Mormon is divinely inspired. Almost the same thing. They had angels, they claim, that came to Joseph Smith, just like Muhammad claims that Gabriel came to him, right? Very similar. The Book of Mormon claims to be a divine work of God. They say it's the most accurate book in all the earth. Just same thing. Like, there's very similar things that are going on there. And they'll say, well, the Bible's correct as so far it's correctly translated. Again, you know what that means in proper interpretation? As long as it doesn't go against what we believe, the Bible's okay.
Yeah,
And
in
that's
our
what people
book.
do. It's Bible buffet. You pick and choose what you want to fit your theology, and you throw out the rest. And so that's what a lot of groups do.
Yeah, so it's kind of
Yep.
a Joe or Mo type. That's not a good analogy. I'm sorry. Okay, let me let's go to this other piece here. Okay, you said that you were involved in apologetics, and I just absolutely. If you look at, well, you can't see my books over. Most of my books are that way, but if you look at the majority of those books over, they deal specifically with apologetics.
Cool.
And I'm gonna pin you here. So if we look at, why do we believe the Bible, or what would be, let me just get it out there. What would be your greatest evidence for the Bible, the veracity of the Bible, the gospel message being true, if you were going to reach out to somebody that didn't believe?
The greatest evidence for, like, the New Testament, or just the Bible as a whole?
The gospel message itself, Jesus Christ,
The
being the Son of
gospel.
God, right?
Well, unequivocally, it would be the crucifixion of Christ.
Okay.
Historically, the crucifixion, again, even going back to some of the conversation, Muslims, in the Surah 4:157, they actually claim that Jesus was never crucified. Someone else was put in his place. He was taken up. They have different theories how all that worked. But historically, the evidence is unequivocally true that the crucifixion of Christ is a fact. It's actually the most documented thing, even by non-Christians, non-Christian scholars and historians. And so, looking back to the personage of Jesus Christ, the early times of what he taught, his claims, why he was crucified, and then, of course, then 3 days later, this resurrection story. Well, there's different theories. There's the hallucination theory. There's the swoon theory. There's he never died theory. They stole his body theory. There's all these different theories of Jesus wasn't resurrected, but somehow something else took place. But the fact is, those are all unsubstantiated. And what's fascinating is this. This is when I'm talking to, say, someone who's an atheist per se, and they'll say to me, "Well, how do you know Jesus really rose again?" I said, "Well, okay. Well, first off, historically, he lived and he died, and this is a historical fact even with non-Christians and non-Christian scholars. So this is what we go off. So now, according to the claim of the Gospels, what he taught, he claimed numerous times that he'd be raised from the dead, according to the scriptures. And then the disciples, who were his disciples, went out, as we read, preaching that same message. And many of them were martyred for their faith. In fact, all of the disciples were martyred for the faith except for John the Apostle. He was the one that died of old age. Right. So you look at that fact, they all gave their lives for this story. And other Christians who heard it, as we read from early historians, were giving their lives for this same story. You say, well, why does that matter? Well, here's why it matters, is because if this was a bunch of poo-poo, you wouldn't go out and tell your family, your friends, this fabricated lie. You don't get any money out of it. You get no fame. You don't get, some trophy for saying this lie. You can be beaten. You can be persecuted. You could be flogged. You could be crucified. You could be eaten by whatever out there. Telling this to your family and friends. Who would do that? Nobody would do that. And honestly, in the early church, the cross was, to people, it was mocked. It was like, your Jesus died upon the cross? It was shameful. And that's why Paul says in Romans 1:16, for I am not ashamed of the gospel, right? So the gospel is actually good news. It's victory. And so the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection actually point to the evidence that the Christian faith is authentic. It points to the fact that God is real because Jesus came to reveal the Father to mankind. So those are some of the, that's what even Paul says in the New Testament. If Christ is not raised from the dead, our faith is in vain. We're still in our sins. So really, we wouldn't be talking.
We're the ones to be most
if Jesus wasn't raised.
Yeah. Yeah. With that being the historical fact, I went at it. Well, I didn't really go at it with. I jazzed a mod one night. I can't even remember where it was, but we're going back and forth about, providing just one peer-reviewed article from any reputable theological journal showing that Christ was not crucified. Show me a scholar that actually believes that. And he could not produce, just one peer-reviewed paper that makes that assertion. And the reason why is because it is, just like you said, it is the most demonstrable historical fact from antiquity. In order to do history, I'm a history guy. In order to do history, and in order to get something to be established as an historical event, the only thing you need is just one source saying that the event occurred. In order to get it to be confirmed as a historical event, you need two. In order to get it to be unimpeachable, meaning that nobody can question it. If you have three, nobody questions it. The gospel has 12 different sources. The crucifixion of Christ has 12 different sources. You cannot question something that did occur. And he admitted in his debate, Ijaz did, with Stephen Atkins, that the reason why that he believes that Jesus was crucified or was not crucified is because of what the Quran says. He admitted it's not because of what the evidence leads him to. And the evidence says that he was crucified. And one of the things that I just want to touch on this briefly, and we'll go to the next one.
Can I make one more quick comment, Eric?
Yeah, sure.
One more quick point on what we were just talking about. Here's the thing. In Jewish writings, after the time of the crucifixion and what the Christians were claiming about Jesus being raised, in the Jewish Babylonian Talmud, they actually talk about Jesus being crucified on the eve of the Passover, claim that he was crucified on the tree for idolatry and things like that. And they write about him in numerous places in a very negative way. So they acknowledge he was existed. They acknowledge he was crucified. But you notice one thing, they never wrote one thing. There's nothing that they ever wrote combating the evidence that he was raised from the dead. There's nothing that they ever wrote. Now, I'm thinking if I was a Jewish person during those times and Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, you would find the dead body somewhere, you'd find it, or you'd produce evidence to stop this ridiculous false claim that these early Christians were claiming. And to our surprise, there was nothing ever said.
Exactly right. Yeah. And the other part that you had touched on was, the disciples, and how it just essentially changed their lives. You said that people would not die for something that they're not gaining. I mean, they had everything to lose. They didn't have anything to gain from this. They had everything
Yeah.
to lose.
Yeah.
But if you see somebody that had died and they're alive again, that is going to change your life. And that's exactly what they did. They went out and changed the world. And every single one of them, with the exception of John,
Right.
went to his death proclaiming not what they believed would be true, but what they knew,
Yes.
that they had saw with their own eyes
Yes.
to be true.
Can I just chime in here real quick on that?
No.
John Madden's here. What's up, John Madden?
I'm sorry. I promise I won't Madden the show. So
Back from the dead.
well, the Muslims they believe in those healing herbs and spices. Better than that KFC stuff, man. We got to find that stuff, man, and go out and sell it. Cures death and everything, including crucifixion. But no, one of the things that I've noticed reading about the agnostic sources, because for some reason every anti-Christian group out there loves to bring up the Gnostic sources, right? I don't know why, but they do.
Oh yes, they love it so much.
If you notice the Gnostic sources, for what I read on them, none of them would die for what they believed. They were all, basically, I don't know, hedonists, pretty much, or they would deny like the flesh. You know what I mean? I mean, not deny the flesh, but they would still enact in the flesh, but they would say that was bad, and they would feel guilty about it or whatever. They would go through certain rituals to pure themselves, but none of them would die for it. I mean, it was completely easy to stomp them out. I mean, because they'd be like, yeah, okay, we're not dying for that crap.
Yeah.
But if you notice all the Christians, I mean, we were talking about Hatun, and now she reminds me to read the story of Felicity and Perpetua. You know what I mean? That story I've been seeing bringing tears to my eyes right now. This woman is being mauled by wild animals. She's thrown by a bull, and she cinches up her tunic and fixes her hair because she wanted to make sure she was presentable to the Lord, and in modesty, and you know what I mean? I was like, wow, that takes.
And she started preaching grace and love to them right after that. I watched the video that same morning as it was all going around, and as she's there before she gets put in that car taken away, blood on her face, and she's saying, "This is not the way it should be. You need to know Jesus." And she was sharing them love and grace, and then she was on, I think, her first episode yesterday live or something like that, or whatever it was the day before. And she said she was praying for them. She showed them love and grace. She didn't attack them or slander them. She showed them love. It was amazing.
I know, exactly. And that's, our favorite Bloody Mary Imam. Even his drink choice is offensive to Christians. I don't get that. But anyway, Kelly, you don't know that. You don't know that he admits that he likes to drink Bloody Marys, and that's another story. Anyway, but I shouldn't pick on him like that. But no,
only red would go there. That's what gets me in trouble. That's why I'm in trouble all the time.
That's probably why.
God mad and getting people in trouble.
I know it's
Go back to the grave, John.
I do good work, man. Anyway, no, he brought up when she got attacked the first time and got punched in the face. He brought up, did she turn the other cheek? Just totally mocking her. And we were watching that video. I'm like, that's what turning the other cheek looks like, dude. You know what I mean? That's what she did. She totally.
She's been attacked a lot out there. I don't follow her or watch all of her stuff, but I've known her for a little bit. She's been attacked, slapped, shoved down, smacked.
Pull the chair out of under. Oh yeah.
Yeah, they stole her Bible a couple weeks ago,
and she could have been dead a few days ago. Went to be with Jesus Christ. I mean, that would have been a praise. But I think through this, she's going to
and a zillion more would have taken her place.
She's going to reach more Muslims now, and I think it's going to be great.
Oh yeah, the blood of the martyrs, right?
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
When I was listening to Charles Doyle the other night, briefly, and he keeps bringing up like all these verses in the Old Testament, like David having sex, the adulterous woman and stuff like that. I don't get how you can read that and think that the Bible is encouraging that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I just don't understand that, and especially with the punishments that come with what he did. As a matter of fact, he shed so much blood that he could not build the temple. He was forbidden from doing that. But
what's funny is he's a reverted revert back to Islam, right? And he left, and now he's back again, apparently, right? But the thing is, so when David wrote those things and Psalms and those things, those were considered people of the book. That's scripture.
Exactly.
That hasn't been altered or changed, right? So
Right.
he's actually mocking what the Quran says is scripture.
Right.
Hello,
Yes, they
right?
are. They are
And
mocking
here's the
Allah,
thing. Think about
Muhammad.
this.
They're the ones that are insulting Muhammad.
Yeah. Think about this. I've heard this said. Oh well, those things would never be in the Quran. We would never have such and such like that in the Quran, right? Well, no wonder if you cookie cutter it make it look perfect like the Book of Mormon. Everyone's going to want to think, oh, yay, woo, we're at Toys R Us, right? What's neat about the Bible is this is real history, sinners that did stupid things at times, did bad things, and there was consequences. That's why the Bible is so important, because it doesn't say, oh, let's take that out. Ooh, let's take that out because, ooh, that doesn't look good. No, these are people that really lived, and it was actually written down so that we could know what happened. It's not encouraging. It's not saying it was okay, but that we can actually learn from these things, learn how not to do those things, and learn how God at times did bring judgment upon people who went against his word. And so it's funny how certain people will say, oh, that's in the Bible. Oh, no. No, these things actually are there so that we can know what actually happened. It's not endorsing them. It's just saying, look, this is what happened, and here it's historical things. And so people get all bent, especially atheists. Atheists mock the Bible all the time, saying certain things. And it's like, look, this is really, I mean, if you had a historical book of my teenage years, my goodness gracious, I think we probably all have a history, right?
Yeah, we don't want to talk about
we
that.
probably wouldn't be talking to each other, right? I mean, we're all like that, right? So, but I mean, here's the thing. This is real history. And that's what I like about the Bible in general, is because it doesn't hide things. It doesn't sugarcoat things and make it look to be all this wonderfulness. It gives you real, raw history.
And that's another thing they can't figure out, or at least can't, that David is called a man after God's own heart. Well, yeah, why? Because he repented. He took the correction. Okay, he didn't give everything over.
And he sought the forgiveness instead of the judgment.
And not only that,
this is the difference between David and Muhammad is that when David sinned, he repented. He admitted that he had sinned, and he sought God's forgiveness. Muhammad got more revelation supporting his sins. Here's
another thing. I'll turn the show back over to Eric. But I get in trouble for this.
Thank you, Rad. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but no. Another thing I've noticed is that in Islam, there has to be some good in you in order for Allah to guide you. You know what I mean? God is dependent, or their God is dependent upon the creation, that there has to be some good. As a matter of fact, the Quran says that Allah only guides the rightly guided. So if you're already rightly guided, why do you need Allah to guide you? And the Muslim response is, well, he'll guide you a little bit further. Well, no.
Oh, wow. Yeah. See,
what do I need?
It just busts itself.
Exactly. All right, back to you, Eric.
And Eric, you got a little over 10 minutes to skedaddle.
Yeah. That's that. We're good. We're good. Okay, so now you said that you'd done a lot of outreach to people, to different various faith groups, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Muslims, and things of that nature. But have you, in that process, while doing that, have you ever offended anyone?
Yeah, I'm a really bad guy. Being silly.
Hey preacher.
I'm a horrible. Let me get. So one time in Las Vegas some years ago, part of Calvary Chapel, I was involved with leadership and young adults, and we had a group of us that would go out on Friday nights, and a group that would stay at a home and be praying for us. And there was about 5 of us that went out, and we went out to a certain place in the evening. It was kind of like a pub, but it didn't have alcohol, and it was like a goth environment. Okay, so it's like goth environment, and I'm not lying. There was even like satanic kind of worshipers, kind of people there, and all this. And so us 5, we actually intentionally prayed about going to this particular place that was, in the rightly so words, demonic. And there was probably, I don't know the exact numbers, but it was a lot of people. I would say at least 50 people or so in this place that we went into. Went in, you could have food and stuff and all that. It was some kind of, but it was a certain place that they would hang out. And we went into it, had our Bibles. We sat down at a table, us 5. We opened up our Bibles. We had some food, make sure we got some food and all to contribute. We were, just sitting there. And we sat down at our table and we're reading the Bible. And we just started reading the Bible. And then people noticed that we did not look like them. And obviously, and noticed we were reading the Bible, and people started surrounding us and started asking, what are you guys doing here? Why are you here? And we said, well, we're just here reading the Bible, and we want to talk to you about Jesus. And it was great in a sense that because it opened up all kinds of conversations talking to multiple people. And at first, these people were really not happy, and rightly so. But as we started talking with them more and more and found out that we weren't hate preachers, we didn't go there to condemn them or judge them. We came there to show them grace. And there was actually 2 guys there. They weren't goth, but they were really big guys, and they were claiming to be homosexuals. And they really, they were shouting in my face, yelling at me and saying, you Christians are so judgmental and this and that and God and all this and that. And I let them talk and say, hey, look, I know there's some people like that. I said, there's people who might, jump all over you and slander you and call you names. I said, I'm not here. I'm not calling you names. I'm here because I want to share Jesus with you. He loves you. He died for you. And despite your lifestyle, God loves you and he can change you and work inside out. And so I showed them grace. And so instead of them wanting to punch me and beat me up and put me in the corner and make me look like a little whatever, they actually started talking to me, interacting with me. And I hugged both of those guys before they left. And they said, thank you for coming. And so, yes, so I'm a really horrible guy. I'm a hate preacher.
I was going to ask you about
all kinds of problems. So make sure that you put people in houses and lock the doors, because I'm a huge threat to society.
That's some serious hate preaching, brother. Serious hate preaching.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why if this is what happens when you engage with people, why would anybody then try to categorize you as a hate preacher? Why do you think? And I know it's kind of hard sometimes to ascribe motivations to people. But there has to be something. There has to be a common denominator. I mean, do Mormons come back and call you a hate preacher? Do Jehovah's Witnesses call you a hate preacher? Do the Oneness Unitarian, all these people, do they call you hate preachers, or there's just one sect of people that do that?
No, I do get it from other people. I won't lie. I get emails. From people. This is true. I'll get emails. I do, because of my website, rootinchrist.org. Because I have certain articles on there that address names of certain people of the Word of Faith, and so I will get emails from people who will say to me, Kelly Powers, how dare you judge such and such? Don't touch God's anointed, things like that. How dare you? God's going to send you to hell. And so I get emails from people. I get criticism. There will be people who are LDS, Latter-day Saints, Mormons, who, because I'm considered an anti-Mormon, right, because I'm sharing things against their prophet or the Book of Mormon, they will look at you as this kind of person. That's what they think. Same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses will think you're like anti-Jehovah's Witness because if you want to share something with them or something that might be contrary, you might even have a resource of something that you want to share with them that is information about why they may be wrong. They consider that anti-literature. But here's the point. That's what is the face value. That's what it seems to be. But then when you start talking with them a little bit more and say, look, this is what I'm doing and why, because I care about you. And I'm not here calling you names. I'm not out here inciting violence. I'm not doing anything like that to harm anybody. I'm just here because I care about you. And then once they actually start seeing that you actually care about them, that expression, they don't know how much you care until they know how much, they don't know how much you know, until they know how much you care, right? And so a lot of times there's this stereotype. And so people will label you hate preacher for all the wrong reasons, and they'll blow a bunch of smoke and whatever else. And that's been happening to me recently online. And, and I've been very gracious and very kind in response and praying for certain people. But, Jesus was God incarnate. Jesus was grace and love to the people. And what happened? They put him on a cross. And so am I any better than Jesus? I expect persecution. I expect slander. I expect people to say things falsely about me, because that's just what's going to happen.
Okay. So you mentioned that all this stuff recently that has occurred, and this is basically what has got, put you and I had our paths cross, is this common denominator being labeled
Yeah.
hate preachers, and I'll be done here in just a little bit. Okay, I'll drive down separately. Okay. I gotta go. We got our church. I got to get my wife down to the church and open it up because she's got to make copies. So I'm sorry for ending this short. But Kelly, thank you for coming.
Let's have a part 2 down the road. How's that?
Come back.
We can. We
Come
will.
back.
Yeah, and
part
let's make
2.
sure that we leave it at there too, and we'll put down our
We'll come back to us being these horrible hate preachers inciting so much violence.
And you know what I'll do is I'll find a good graphic from Google.
Yeah, like
Image
put it. Here, take this. Look, there you go. That's the picture for you right there. There you go.
Well, if
all right,
Eric
everybody
ends
that's
the stream,
come, thank you for coming.
Well, if Eric, you end the stream, we can sit here and still chat after Eric leaves. We can talk about it.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end the
Yeah, I
broadcast.
can say behind the scenes.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. You guys take care, and we'll see you on Sunday. God bless.
All right, God bless. Okay, now that Eric